Hey there, welcome to Big Al Books. Today I'm here to do the mid-year book freakout tag, and I was tagged to make this video by Alex from What Page Are You On? I adore his channel and I really liked his take on this tag, so I will link that for your convenience down below. And yeah, this video is like a classic booktube tradition where you take a pause at the halfway point of the year and look back and reflect on how your reading has been going so far. And in 2020, it has been a very strange and unprecedented year in many different facets of my life, but definitely it has been a really unusual reading year for me. And the biggest change that I've noticed is just the sheer amount that I've been able to read this year since I've been in lockdown and working from home since midway through the month of March. I don't have an exact number for how many books I've read so far this year, but I know that it's well over 100, which is definitely a first for me. So you can clearly see how I've been coping with this whole lockdown situation. I've just been chilling at home and making some serious progress with my reading. So it was kind of funny thinking about the answers for this tag because I just had to go through so many titles back in my memory from what I've read so far this year. So to help me get through this video, I've made a whole French press of tea. So I'm hoping that you will notice that I am much more caffeinated by the end of this video than I am at the start. But yeah, let's get right on into the tag, shall we? Question number one is, what is the best book that you've read so far this year? And for me, this is a very easy question to answer because it has to go to In Search of Lost Time by Marcel Proust. Now, this started off innocently enough. In the month of January, I thought that I would read Swan's Way, and I had no interest in completing the whole series. I thought that that would happen much farther along in my future, but when I was reading this book, I totally fell in love with Proust's writing style. It just was an exhilarating experience. So by the end of the month, I had ordered this bad boy. And every month since January, I have been treating myself to one volume of this epic literary project, and it was a fantastic reading experience. Getting through this series in 2020 seemed like such perfect timing because I'd started it well before lockdown had begun, but really when I was getting through most of these books, I was kind of stuck at home, and I feel like Proust had just become a companion in my life, and he got to dazzle me with his insights about his own social world, which made me feel like I wasn't really that alone or removed from society because I was getting to experience it so vicariously through these wonderful books. So I am so glad that I picked up In Search of Lost Time this year. It was a truly immersive and impressive reading experience. Question number two is, what is the best sequel you've read this year? And I picked Youth by Tove Ditlevsen. This is the second book in her Copenhagen Trilogy, and this is a series that is very heavily autobiographical, but not entirely, and it's about a girl who's growing up in a working class family in Copenhagen after the turn of the 20th century. And the first book in this really floored me because it is such like a bleak and honest depiction of her childhood. There is nothing romanticized about it. But then Youth did a great job of carrying on that energy and that honesty that we saw in childhood, but also showing us a new side of the narrator as she is starting to grow up. She's starting to get her first jobs, and in childhood we learn that she wants to become a poet, which no one around her thinks is a really serious profession, and they kind of make fun of her, and we see her really trying to follow her literary aspirations in this book. And I thought it was fascinating to watch her try to start her literary career in this novel. If you're not privileged, if you don't have money or connections, it can be so difficult to get anyone to publish you or to take you seriously, and she has to do some interesting, risky things in this book to get people to read her work. So I thought this was a very wonderful installation in this trilogy, but really I loved all three of the books in it. Question number three is new releases you haven't read yet but want to. So I have three books that I'm quite excited about. One of them is called The Skin You're In by Desmond Cole, and this one is taking a look at racism in Canada, particularly in the year 2017, so I think that it should be very in-depth and thought-provoking. I'm also looking forward to the essay collection called Disparates by Patrick Madden. First of all, the essays in this collection sound like they're going to be brilliant and engaging, but also the cover has a bunch of gargoyles on it, so that was just kind of an auto-buy for me. And the third book I want to read is Parakeet by Marie-Helene Bertino. This one sounds like it's kind of fun and strange. It's about a woman who's about to get married, but then this parakeet, who she thinks is her dead grandmother, tells her that she needs to stop the wedding. So I don't know, that one has kind of intrigued me and I've heard some good things about it, so I am waiting to get a hold of that one as my library starts opening up again. And question number 4 is your most anticipated new release for the second half of the year. Luckily enough for me, the book that I'm the most excited about is dropping in September, so that's only a few months away, and that is Nupiming, The Cure for White Ladies by Leanne Batasamasake Simpson, and she is a Michisigig Nishnabeg author. She is just one of my favorite writers out there, and this is her debut novel. And the thing about Leanne's work is that it is always genre-busting and thought-provoking, and she's just wholly unique. So nothing that she does is like anything that you've ever read before. So the thought of her taking on the structure of the novel is very exciting. I think she is going to do great things with the form. I've heard that the title of this book translates to In the Bush, so I think that this book is going to be taking on the colonial legacy of the Canadian pioneer classic Roughing It in the Bush by Susanna Moodie. But I also think this book is going to be totally its own thing. From what I've heard, there are many different narrators that are narrating from different perspectives from the main character. So like you hear from this person's central nervous system and from their brain and all sorts of different parts of their being. So it's going to be a fabulous experience. I'm sure of that already. Question number 5 is biggest disappointments, and I've been pretty lucky this year. I haven't experienced much literary heartbreak, and I've actually been really enjoying most of the books that I've been picking up. However, one that I did find pretty disappointing was Sleepless Nights by Elizabeth Hardwick, because I'd been looking forward to this one. I've seen rapturous reviews of this book, and I could tell from reading it that Elizabeth Hardwick is super intelligent and she really knows how to write, but this novella just did not come together for me at all. I remember so little about it, and I feel like I just really didn't get the point of this one, so I found this one to be a disappointing experience because I'd really hyped this one up for a long time, and it just didn't work out for me. Question number 6 is biggest surprise, and I would have to go with the Lock and Key graphic novel series for this by Joe Hill and illustrated by Gabrielle Rodriguez, because these graphic novels just blew me away, and I was kind of reluctant about picking them up. Even though my partner had recommended them to me for a long time, I just didn't feel like I liked the art style very much, so I had been avoiding them. But then there was a Netflix adaptation of the series coming out, so I thought I'd check out the first one to see if I was interested in the adaptation. And then in a total turn of events, I ended up not caring for the adaptation at all, but completely falling in love with the graphic novel series. And I fell in love with the graphic novels very early on in the process. I was pretty surprised with how quickly I really attached myself and formed very strong emotional bonds with all of the members of the Locke family in this series. They've gone through some serious traumatic stuff. Their family is messy and complicated, not to mention all of the weird supernatural things that are happening in the series. But they were just such complex, real people. I really cared for them, and that's what made the series so scary, because they're going through these really terrifying experiences and you just want them to be okay by the end of it. So yeah, I was kind of surprised how emotionally connected I became to this series while I was reading it. Question number 7 is favorite new author, and this can be a debut author or an author who you just read for the first time this year, and I am just never able to answer one person for this question because I feel like every year I am just stumbling across more and more amazing voices. 2 debut novels that I read that have really stood out to me this year have been The Deeper the Water, the Uglier the Fish by Katja Apekina, and House of Stone by Nobuyu Rosa Tsushima. So these are both authors who only have this one book out right now, but I will be following their careers and definitely checking out whatever they do next, because these debuts were both actually very messed up and disturbing debuts. These are just 2 extremely dark books, but they were very powerful, so I'm excited to see actually where they go after these incredible debuts. And then for debut memoirists, there are 4 memoirs in particular that are kind of standing out in my memory. They were all written by debut authors, and also all of these authors happen to be Indigenous. So the 4 memoirs are In My Own Moccasins by Helen Knott, From the Ashes by Jessie Thistle, Nitisinach by Lindsay Nixon, and Heartberries by Therese Marie Maillot. They're all incredibly different from each other, but they're all really powerful stories, so I would recommend checking out any of these memoirs. Question number 8 is, who is your new fictional crush? And if you've been following my channel for a few years and have watched a few iterations of this tag from me, you might recall that I kind of have a thing for weird old dudes. So I thought I would keep that trend running this year, and I had to go with Abbe Faria from The Count of Monte Cristo, because he is just one of the most lovable weird old dudes that I've ever encountered before. He is brilliant, he is just so sweet and helpful and kind and thoughtful, and if I were ever wrongfully convicted and locked up in a jail cell, he is just the one person that I would want to have as a cell neighbor. I would love to meet this guy in prison. Like, he is what makes the whole situation bearable, and I also really like that all of the guards and everyone think that he's just totally crazy, but actually he's just really brilliant and no one else is really on his level. So that was probably my favorite scene of the book were the parts with him, and I guess that is just because I have a huge crush on him and it's true love. So that was an easy answer for this question. Question number 9 is your new favorite character, and I can't just go with one person because I've had so many interesting literary friends made this year. But to go back to The Count of Monte Cristo, obviously I adore Abbe Faria, but I also think that the title character, the Count of Monte Cristo, Edmond Dantes himself, is a really fun character. So I really liked getting to know him in this book. I just love the whole switch that he does with his personality because, we see him one way at the start of the book and then he just transforms into this count, and he really pulls off the role of being the count. I think that role takes a lot of dedication and persistence, and it's impressive how cool he is able to make himself once he becomes rich. And he's just so mysterious and fascinating, so I really liked spending some time with him in this book. And then another one of my favorite characters was Grendel, especially from the novel Grendel by John Gardner. Though he does appear in Beowulf and he's quite intriguing as the monster, it is this novel that really gives him a character, and you get to follow his thoughts and his emotions, and he's a complex little guy. He's very angry and warped in a lot of ways, but again, I just found him so lovable and funny in this book, which I wasn't really expecting for a famous monster, so I was really happy with the characterization in here. And then I love a good villain, and I have to say that Richard III in the Shakespeare play really delivered for me. You also get to see Richard III in the Henry VI plays, and I just loved any time that he popped up. He's, of course, a pretty ruthless guy. You don't want to go to brunch with him, but I found him fascinating to follow as a dramatic character, especially because he's someone who is hateful, partly because he has only received hate from other people because of his disfigured appearance, and he has just chosen to take that hatred and project it back on the world, but just by 1,000. So he was a fascinating character to follow. I also really loved the character called Second Murderer in this play. He is someone who has been hired basically to kill another person, and he has this crisis of conscience, which I thought was really sweet. So even though he's a very small character in here, he definitely stole my heart a bit. And then a final character that I wanted to mention is Miranda, or Mama Day, from the novel Mama Day by Gloria Naylor. She is just a wonderful old lady who has this really sharp, ferocious sense of humor, and she does not take anyone's crap, but then she's also this very powerful woman, so she was just a fascinating character to follow in this really excellent book. Question number 10 is a book that made you cry, and I feel like every year this question just exposes me for how soft and emotional I can be sometimes when I'm reading. And it was kind of weird things that made me cry this year. So I mentioned already before I had this strong emotional bond with the Lock and Key graphic novel series, and definitely book 6 of that series had me sobbing. And then also, weirdly enough, I had 2 short stories make me cry this year, and both of these stories are the title stories of their collection. So A Guide to Being Born by Ramona Ozabel was the story about these old ladies that are on a boat, but they're actually dead, and this one just had me crying in the bathtub. And then The Paper Menagerie by Ken Liu dealt with the immigration experience and how when you're a kid growing up with immigrant parents, you feel like their culture isn't cool because you just want to fit in with the kids around you, and like how heartbreaking that is for the parents who have sacrificed so much to bring you to this country and who kind of have to disconnect from their culture or not be able to share it with their children. And like that just hit so many emotions for me. So this story was for sure devastating. And then I also have to mention the novel Keeper and Me by Richard Wagamese, because his books always make me cry. I don't think I've ever finished one of his novels without having a good little cry at the end. And this one was a bit different though, because they were happy tears. You know, this was just like a good feeling kind of novel. So it didn't emotionally devastate me in the way that some of his other books have. But yeah, it definitely got me a bit misty at the end. And then I also feel like I have to mention some plays, because plays have really been getting to my emotions these days. There are so many good productions being uploaded to YouTube right now. I'm especially trying to follow plays by the Stratford Theatre in Canada and by the National Theatre in the UK, and they have had some outstanding plays, but I particularly was sobbing after watching Stratford's production of King Lear, and then after watching National Theatre's production of A Streetcar Named Desire. That one had me sobbing for like 10 minutes. And the thing is, like, I wasn't expecting it, because all that I really knew about that play was the musical episode from The Simpsons, which just did not have me prepared for how dark and devastating that play is. So yeah, there have been some tears shed in 2020 already, but at least all of these crying experiences have been quite cathartic and therapeutic, and they really felt like rewarding experiences in the end. Question number 11 is, what is a book that has made you happy? And it's kind of a cheesy answer, but I feel like all of the books that I've read this year have been a huge part of keeping my mental health game going strong. Like, books have just brought me so much joy. You know, in a year where we haven't really been able to go outside and engage with the outside world, I feel like books have just brought that outside world to me. So that's helped me feel a lot better about some of the things that we've been missing out on so far. But I did pick 3 in particular that have made me happy for very different reasons. So these are actually all books that I read in May. So I guess that was just like a good peak month for me. But the first book I wanted to mention is Waterships Down by Richard Adams. Now, you'd think that this book would be happy because it's about cute little bunnies, but actually this book is kind of terrifying and intense because they face so many obstacles. But what made me happy about this book is anytime that they would survive or succeed, I was really rooting for the bunnies. And also I made the decision to only read this book when I was sitting outside, and it was just the start of spring, so anytime that it was warm enough and sunny enough for me to be outside reading, I was just so happy and enjoying the change in the season. The second book I wanted to mention is a memoir called Sing Backwards and Weep by Mark Lanigan. He is a singer that I have just loved for a very long time, and I particularly am obsessed with his low, smoky voice, and he narrated the audiobook for this memoir, so it was a great joy in my life just having Mark's gloomy vocals narrate my life for like a whole month, so I really look back fondly on that time. And then the third book that made me happy was Howard's End by E.M. Forster. This was a reread for me, but I had the most joyful experience rereading this book because I realized that this is just one of my favorite books of all time. I didn't really pick up on that the first time that I read it, but I just loved everything about this book the second time. I underlined so many passages and I had so much fun reading this, so it really stuck out in my memory. Question number 12 is most beautiful book that I bought or received. Once again, I think I have to mention the Copenhagen Trilogy by Tove Ditlevsen. These are just these kind of like beautiful pink books with these interesting vintage photographs on them. There is a third book in the trilogy that I have loaned out to my mother, so you can't see the effect of the whole trilogy, but they look really beautiful together on my bookshelf. I don't think I have any other books that are quite this shade of pink. At first, I was kind of salty that all of these books were published in separate editions because they're pretty short, like they're around 120 pages each, so I thought it was a bit of a ripoff that you're kind of paying $20 for each of these books when they could clearly fit in one bind-up. However, I feel a bit less ripped off about the situation since the 3 volumes together do look really good together on my bookshelf, so I'm forgiving the publishers for that. And then question 13 is, what are some books that you have to read by the end of the year? So technically, I don't really have to read anything else. I've hit my Goodreads goal. I can really slack off for the rest of the year if I want to. However, I do have one reading project that I am pretty committed to finishing, and that is I'm trying to get through all of Shakespeare's plays, and I only have 8 more to go. So I think I'm going to try to finish them this summer because I still have 8 weeks left of summer vacation and I have 8 plays to go. So that should be pretty perfect if I time it with just 1 play a week. And yeah, then I will be done with all 37 of the plays. So that will be kind of a big English teacher life accomplishment moment for me. So I'm quite excited about fulfilling that reading goal by the end of the summer. So that's it for my 2020 mid-year book freakout tag. I'm not going to tag anyone specifically today because we are already well past the halfway point of the year. Once again, I'm late to the party to filming this, so I feel like anyone who has wanted to film this version of the tag has already filmed it, but of course if you haven't and you want to, please do. And if you don't have a booktube channel but you feel like answering some of these questions, please feel free to answer them down below in my comment section because I love hearing everyone's answers. I love this process of like taking stock and reflecting on the best of the best. So I'd love to hear about how your reading year has been going so far. But that's it for me today. Thanks so much for checking out this video, and I will see you again later. Bye!